Hey guys, this is EJ Holland with the Wolverine.com, and we're back with another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show here on Wednesday evening. We're going to spend about half an hour talking about the latest in Michigan recruiting. Then I'm heading over to the movies to see Asteroid City. Really excited. So make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. Like this video, it helps us get in front of other Michigan fans. And also, last promo, if you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine.com, then make sure to subscribe today. $99 for 1 year gets you premium insider recruiting information, team information, basketball recruiting, and so much more. Plus, you get NIL, transfer portal, a great message board community with more than 8,000 unique individual users all over at the Wolverine.com today. All right, today is the Wednesday show, which means I'll be answering any question that pop up in the chat box, recruiting, not recruiting, whatever you guys want to talk about. But if you do want to contribute to our travel budget, you can click that little donate button. It's the little money symbol. That money goes directly to our travel budget. We're going to start planning out fall travel here pretty soon, seeing all of Michigan's commits, some key targets. So if you want to contribute to that, hit that super chat button. It also allows you to skip the line to get your question answered first. So again, if you want to super chat, just hit that little donate button and that'll skip you to the front of the line. Okay, now I think we are done with announcements. So first question comes from Jeff M, and he says, "Are there any class of 2024 true cornerbacks left on Michigan's board? Is Michigan better off focusing on the class of 25 cornerback prospects?" So yeah, I'm actually working on a story on that. Obviously, Michigan invested a lot of resources when it came to Bryce West and Aaron Scott. They were the two guys at the very top of the corner board for basically the entire cycle. And so, when you invest in two guys that are that highly touted from Ohio, from enemy territory that Ohio State wants, it's a challenge. So it's going to be tough to win those battles. Bryce West obviously committed to Ohio State, but Michigan still squarely in the mix with Aaron Scott ahead of his July 30th announcement date. You see, Ohio State still has the commanding lead on the on-three recruiting prediction machine, but we all know this race is much closer than that. So, as it stands right now, Aaron Scott is the lone guy on the corner board, which is pretty scary considering Michigan doesn't have any cornerback commits. Last cycle obviously featured Jair Hill, which was a great win late, but you'd still like to see Michigan land more high level corners. There's a need for corner on the roster right now. So, that's been a big pitch to Aaron Scott, but he is the guy as things stand now. With Michigan missing on, I don't even want to call them secondary targets. I just feel like we've talked so much about Scott and West, but two other guys that Michigan absolutely would have taken during June official visits were Jameer Grimsley and Sharian Nichols. And obviously, both of those guys committed elsewhere. Nichols to Kentucky, Grimsley to Alabama. So there isn't really anybody else left on the board. So what does Michigan do from here? Well, obviously they continue to recruit the hell out of Aaron Scott, but they're going to have to come together and figure out a plan for cornerback recruiting moving forward. Now, you do have a flex guy in Jacob Oden. I think guys that, or a guy that came off the board in Boo Carter would still be a guy that Michigan's going to continue to recruit till the end. Let's say Michigan loses out on Aaron Scott. I think they'll continue to recruit him till the end as well. But I do think they could circle back to other options. I think they could circle back to some guys they maybe liked early and then cooled on as they really made their pitches to Scott and West. Some guys that come to mind are Jalen Todd, in-state kid out of Southfield. If Zach Libby were here, he would get very excited because that's one of his personal favorites. He's been high on Jalen Todd forever. So Jalen Todd made a couple of visits to Michigan. He's one I would keep a close eye on. He's committed to Kansas right now, I believe. But he's definitely a guy that's familiar with the program. Michigan's familiar with him being an in-state kid, despite his commitment to Kansas. I feel like the Wolverines could work their way back in the mix there. You see, he's 6'1", so he's got pretty good height, pretty good length. I've seen him a couple of times live, including last year in game, and he definitely has a lot of upside. You see, he's just a 3-star guy, but he's kind of on the higher end of the 3-star spectrum. He's at number 533 in the country. Again, committed to Kansas, but I think, if Michigan circles back, that'll definitely move the needle for him. Another guy that comes to mind for me is Lloyd Irvin, who just committed to Maryland last month. Irvin was in the process of scheduling an official visit to Michigan. It never worked out. Um, they actually offered him while they were hitting the DMV during the spring evaluation period. They really liked him. They wanted to see more of him, and then he just, kind of committed to Maryland, and the staff was still full in on West and Scott. But Lloyd Irvin, definitely a DMV guy that was on the rise there too. You see, he's not even rated by On Three. He committed to Maryland, but he had some other Power Five offers as well. I know the staff really liked his size. He's listed at 6'2", 170, and like I said, his stock was on the rise. So I think he'll get a ranking here at some point. But I think it was a nice little find there for Maryland, keeping him close to home. But I would say Michigan could potentially circle back there. And another guy that I was thinking about writing about is Emilio Agard out of Philadelphia St. Joseph's. He just committed to Wisconsin, but he visited Michigan in the fall for the game against Michigan State. He initially had Michigan in his top group. He actually was on campus twice, I believe. So he was there last offseason and then came back for another visit for that game against MSU. So Emilio Agard would be one as well. So those are guys off the top of my head. I think that the staff just has to kind of regroup and see. And you never know with senior risers too. There could be guys we just don't know that pop up, new guys we've never heard of. So that's kind of the state of the board. It's not great, but it is what it is when you go after the best of the best in enemy territory. Let's go ahead and go down to we have Shadyville03 with a super chat, and he says, "Are those the AirPod Maxes?" No, actually, these are. This is so random how I found these headphones. So I needed to get a headphone upgrade because the last one's obviously broke, and we had that one episode where the mic was completely shattered. Um, I got these because I'm a big boxing fan. I listened to a boxing podcast and they were talking about Kenichi Bear headphones and not hashtag not a sponsor, but they were talking about how great they were for podcasting and stuff. So I ended up ordering them. So they are Kenichi Bear headphones. And shout out to the podcast, The Boxing Boys, for referring me to these headphones. So that is what the headphones are. But appreciate your super chat. Remember, guys, you get to hop the line with a super chat, and that money goes to our travel budget so we can see recruits across the country in the fall. And we do have another one from Nick 999. And he says Justin Scott trying to fool people and say OSU was the only school to break down film with him. It's BS. That dude is flaky and just wanted to take more money up front than Michigan would give him SMH. So Nick telling us how he really feels today on Wednesday. I did not see that quote from Justin Scott where he said that Ohio State was the only school to break down film. And of course, we're talking about the 5-star defensive lineman from Chicago, St. Ignatius, who committed to Ohio State over Michigan and others a few days ago. But yeah, I mean, I think NIL played a factor. If I would have to see Scott's quote to really, give my thoughts on it, but I can guarantee you that Michigan did break down film with him because they break down film with every official visitor. They actually do this thing where they get the guys in a position room. So let's say like Justin Scott's visiting and Ted Hammond's visiting and Manuel Beagle are visiting. They'll get them all in a group film session and they'll pull up their high school huddle highlights or their high school film in general because Michigan has access to full games, and they'll compare it side by side to what Michigan does. So the guys in the department behind the scenes that do a great job of the film breakdowns are actually Denard Robinson, Gamble, guys like that are putting together film, and the coaches show it, and they kind of make that comparison. Like, here's why you fit our scheme. Here's what you do at the high school level that's going to translate over to Ann Arbor. So yeah, I can guarantee you that they did break down film with Justin Scott, and it does seem like NIL played a role here, which is unfortunate. I mean, Scott would have been a monster of a for Michigan, but it is what it is. I mean, we talked about corner to open up the show, but nose is another position where Michigan had some options just fall through. Obviously, they went all in on Justin Scott. It did not work out. They went all in on David Polly. That didn't work out. He committed to USC. They were in on some other nose guys that they were going to get in for official visits. Namdi Okoronwo, I'm not even going to pronounce his last name correctly, just committed to Georgia, I believe, or is a strong Georgia lean. Hopefully, I didn't spoil anything there, but he's one they kind of backed off of because of where they stood with Polly and Scott. And then they were going to bring in Micah Rowe as well, but he ended up committing to Florida. So now Michigan has no true nose in this class. So I think nose is one where we're going to have to see what names pop up here late in the year as well. Let's go to Go Blue 81, and he says, "What's going on, EJ? How are we losing out on all these Michigan lean recruits? Is it NIL or out recruited? Shocked by Charles Scott and Weenie. Your thoughts?" So I think everybody's kind of case by case basis. There's no real answer across the board. I think when you look at like a guy I just mentioned, Pale, I'm not sure NIL was that big of a factor. I really think it was more family, and I know he's a Pennsylvania kid, but he's originally from Alaska, and he has a lot of family up and down the West Coast. So obviously he committed to USC, which is his dream school. And when you look at I'm Mexican, he's Polynesian. We have really strong family cultures. A lot of those guys want to stay close to family or want to be around family, and I think going back out west provided him the opportunity. I even wrote like I wouldn't be surprised if his family relocated with him back out west. So and then Sean Nua obviously has those strong Polynesian ties. Now the defensive line coach at USC. So I don't think Poly was one where it was like really NIL related, but I think when you look at Aaron Childs, for example, and everybody knows how much I loved Aaron Childs, so I was personally heartbroken when he pulled that move. But I mean, a guy that was considered a Michigan lean forever, a guy that they were trying to help get on ESPN for his commitment to turn around and commit to Florida and not even officially visit Michigan. I think something was just off in that recruitment. I mean, there's no way, especially with me knowing Childs' way, as much as I did know him, like it's way out of character for Childs to do something like that. So I just feel like there was something fishy going on there. That was one of the biggest shockers I've seen, not just this cycle, which there have been many twists and turns, but my entire career, especially with how much I got to know Aaron Childs. I didn't expect that of him at all. We talked about Justin Scott. Michael Weenie obviously gave a silent commitment, which is pretty public now. I mean, he was ready to commit to Michigan, had the graphic ready to roll and everything, and then turned around and committed to Georgia. And look, it's not like Georgia needs to really sell NIL. They're the back-to-back national champions, but I think any school that has an NIL plan in place where kids can get upfront money are always going to be at an advantage to where Michigan doesn't do that. So when you're comparing two schools you really like and one you can get NIL money potentially up front, then I think it gives them the example. Now I'm not too familiar with what Georgia does on an NIL basis, so I really can't talk that much about it. But that one was just one where it was kind of clear why things turned. So yeah, I think each one was kind of unique in a sense. And like I said, yes, in yesterday's show, like it's not like Justin Scott took the biggest bag. It's not like he just went to Miami and got the most money he could. But like I said, I think if you're a Georgia and you're an Ohio State and you're already really good and you can offer some NIL, I think it obviously still gives you a really big advantage. Where, as if you're Michigan and you're really good, but your NIL still come to campus and you'll get it later, I think that kind of puts you behind the curve. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I'm not going to sit here and have a whole discussion about whether that's good or bad, because at the end of the day, I think it helps weed through some guys and helps Michigan sustain that culture. But I do think they have to find a happy medium so these twists and turns, as we've been calling them, don't keep happening moving forward, especially with guys that are really highly touted and high priority guys like everybody we talked about. Let's go down to Daniel G. And he says, "How are you feeling about Jordan Shipp? Where will Michigan turn to at corner?" So we talked about corner earlier in the show. So if you weren't around, Daniel, I'd go back and listen to it. But it's basically Aaron Scott or Bus and a few guys they could circle back to. But as far as Jordan Shipp, um, like obviously 3-star wide receiver out of Charlotte, Providence Day, teammate of Channing Goodwin and Jaden Davis. Michigan, the leader on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. I've had him in all my mock classes, but I personally haven't put in a prediction for Shipp because I am still a little worried about North Carolina. Like I feel like everybody is downplaying North Carolina except for me, but I am kind of scared of North Carolina. They had the last visit. They did a really good job by all accounts. I have a good source on that end, and the Tar Heels are feeling pretty confident as well. So it's not just like it's not just like this is a slam dunk for Michigan and he's not gonna consider North Carolina. Like North Carolina's right there. He's always thought about staying a little closer to home. He's when you look at these guys as a collective, Jaden Davis, Channing Goodwin, Jordan Shipp, they're all friends. But the thing that always stood out to me about Jordan Shipp was he was the team captain as a junior, not Jaden, not Channing. It was Jordan. Jordan's the guy that kind of ran the show and was his own individual. And so I always felt like Jordan could maybe say, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing here close to home. And so knowing Jordan, I think that's still a possibility. And checking in with Michigan, I can guarantee you there's no silent commitment here. There's still some work to do 11 days away from this visit. So, or 11 days away from this decision. So, yeah, I still feel like Michigan's in a really good spot here, but I am still a little concerned about North Carolina. Let's go down to Buzz. Let's see, Buzz Buzzer, and he says, "Is Justin Scott flippable?" Um, hmm, Probably not, man. I mean, when you look at guys that commit in part because of NIL, I think the flippability, if that's a word, the flippability rate of those guys is probably low. I think Scott probably found a happy medium where he got some NIL, but didn't just go straight up for NIL like Miami would have been. And he still gets to play closer to home, which was the family's preference. So, you never know. You can never rule anything out. It's like I said, Michigan will probably continue to recruit him, just like they'll continue to recruit Aaron Scott if he ends up going to Ohio State. Um, just like they'll continue to recruit Boo Carter, even though he's committed to Tennessee. Um, but I think it's always hard to flip guys. But the good thing is Michigan should be in for a really special season, and I think that'll give the Wolverines maybe a slight chance to flip some of these guys. But I think it's going to be really tough in the case of Justin Scott. Let's go down to Go Blue 81, and he says, "Sorry guys, I'm having like severe allergies all of a sudden. Looks like we made Baker's top list. Do you think Hart will be able to close the deal?" So, Go Blue 81 is talking about Justin Baker, 3-star 2025 running back out of Georgia powerhouse Buford, same school as Mantrez Walker. I think Michigan's in a really good spot for him early on. He released a top 6 and it had some SEC schools, including Georgia. But I'm not sure that Georgia's really pushing super hard for him right now. So that leaves others like Ole Miss and South Carolina. But I do think Michigan is probably the team to beat right now, coming off his June unofficial visit. You see the Wolverines have an 87.7% chance of landing him. My coworker Zach Livy put in a prediction for him. I haven't just yet. I just wanted to see how it played out a little closer to his date. It's still early, even though there is some buzz that he could be an early decider. But yeah, I think he kind of fits the mold of what Mike Hart usually looks for. He's only 5'9", so he's a little bit on the shorter side, but he is built like a tank. He has a great lower half, and I'm really interested to see what he does here as a junior at Buford, especially in that opener against St. Francis. I was actually looking at maybe going down there for that game. So yeah, I think that's early August. So yeah, I mean Buford plays some of the top schools around the state of Georgia. They're obviously expanding nationally, so I think Baker could be in for a breakout season, or at least this season should tell us a lot more about him as a prospect. He's very much on the cusp of being a 4 star. He's around that top 300 ranking. So on three has him just inside the 300, and on the industry ranking, he's only about 30 out. So, yeah, I like Justin Baker. I think he would be a nice compliment to Iverson Howard, who's another 2025 running back they lead with. I wouldn't be surprised if those are the two guys in the class. Let's go down to Scott Knapp, and he says, "Do we even have a 10% chance with Aaron Scott?" Yeah, I would give Michigan a 10% chance for sure. Look, just let's we talked about it on yesterday's show. I think a lot of people are reading a ton into the date, into his commitment date being his dad's birthday. Like I said on yesterday's show, Aaron wanted a date of significance, so it was always going to be July 4 or July 30th. And that was even before he really finished up his official visit. So I think that, Michigan obviously gave him a lot to think about on the OV. Ohio State gave him a lot to think about on its respective OV. And he just wasn't ready to make the call on July 4th. So, I mean, Michigan will continue to do everything it can. I think they certainly feel like they have more than a 10% shot. So we'll see how it plays out. I do think that might favor Ohio State, though, the decision pushed back to the 30th, just because it gives them more time to make an easier decision. That's something I said yesterday, too. It's going to be much easier to say yes to Ohio State than it is going to be to say yes to Michigan, just because, of all the family ties, the proximity, just being an Ohio kid. So, yeah, I would give Michigan more than a 10% chance had he committed on July 4th. I feel like Michigan had a real shot. But the longer it goes, I think the more it might slightly favor Ohio State. But I don't think the date signifies that it's completely over. Let's go ahead and go down to a super chat from Nick. And he says, "Do you think Micah Ka'apana is a 4 star talent?" So, Michigan's 3 star running back Micah Ka'apana. Um, Man, if you look at his numbers, they're pretty insane for a guy that shared carries and wasn't a full-time starter last year. I think it was like 70 something carries for 1,000 yards. And he'll be the featured back at Bishop Gorman, which, I was just talking about Buford. Bishop Gorman is a, national powerhouse. They play some of the best teams across the country. And so I think he'll be on a real showcase platform this year. If he has a great senior season, I could easily see Micah entering that 4 star range. He has a good build, great speed. You see the explosiveness, a good compliment to Jordan Marshall. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about Kapana. I do think he's a 4 star level talent, and if he, repeats what he did as a junior, as a senior, I think he'll vault up into that 4 star range. Let's go ahead and go down to Go Blue 81, and he said, "Who's left besides Jordan Shipp that we could get in 2024?" Bennett Warren. Yeah, Bennett Warren's still on the board. If I had to pick today, I'd probably say that he ends up at Tennessee or Texas A&M. But Michigan still has the lead on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. They're still working to get him as the 6th offensive lineman. So that's one that just consistently keeps changing. But he's still on the board. Gatlin Bear is another guy that Michigan has the lead for on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine. Top 100 wide receiver out of Idaho, down to Boise State, Michigan, and Oregon. I like Michigan's chances there. Obviously, you mentioned Jordan Shipp, Aaron Scott is the talk of the town, and then you have Zaquan Patterson, top 100 safety out of South Florida. Pretty much, down to Michigan and Miami. I think it's going to be one of those two schools. So the Wolverines are working hard to get him back for the barbecue at the Big House after just getting him on campus the last weekend in June for an unofficial visit. So yeah, Zaquan's still a strong possibility as well. And then I'm just not sure who's going to pop up on the corner. Like there could be some more corner targets. There's probably going to be some more nose targets as well. So I think there's going to be guys that we just don't know yet, or guys we circle back to that could potentially be on the board. Let's go down to super chat from Shadyville03, and he says, "Who has the most upside on each side of the ball?" For defense, it's Devin Baxter all the way. I mean, the first time I went out to see Devin Baxter, I was like, damn, this kid can be something special if somebody teaches him how to play football. Um, he has all the tools in the world. He has the length, the athleticism. I mean, that wingspan. I took the picture of him doing the wingspan, and you're just like, wow. And he's not super skinny either. He is on the skinnier side because he shed some weight. He used to be up at 260, but he's down to 235. But he's really tall. He's really athletic. He's quick off the edge. I think he just needs a lot of technical work and some time in the strength and conditioning program. But I think Baxter is a kid that on three has it right with him. They're the only service that has him rated as a 4 star. I'd rate him as a 4 star. I think Baxter is going to be the steal of the class on the defensive side of the ball. Then on the offensive side of the ball, who has the most upside? Um, I think there are a lot of high floor guys on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, when you look at Jaden Davis, I mean, he's a high floor guy. Jordan Marshall's a high floor guy. Marion Stewart, Channing Goodwin. So all these skill players are high floor guys. Brady Prescorn. So I think you have to look to the offensive line, and even though he's rated really high, I still feel like he could move into the top 100. I still really like his ceiling, and that's Andrew Sprague. We've been saying it wrong the entire time. It's Sprague, not Sprague. But Andrew Sprague is a guy that I've been enamored with for a long time. When me and Libby did that draft, like to kick off the year, I took him when there were still several offensive linemen on the board. I mean, he's just a towering tackle with a bunch of natural gifts, and I think he can really turn into something special. And you see on the industry ranking, he's rated at number 146. So he's still kind of high, but not overly high. But I think he's going to be one of the best offensive linemen that Michigan has landed here recently. I'm not comparing him to Zach Zinter because they're two different kinds of offensive linemen. But I remember Zach Zinter watching him and being like, man, how is this guy rated outside the top 100? And it's the same thing when I watch Sprague. It's like, what are people not seeing? So I'm really excited about his ceiling and what he can become at Michigan. But that was a good question, Shadyville03. Let's go to Kyle Tobias, and he says, "What is it going to take for Michigan to have a higher ranked recruiting class than OSU? Even with all of our momentum, they will still swoop in above." What is it going to take? I mean, well, you have to land your big remaining targets. So the three top 100 targets: Gatlin Bear, Aaron Scott, and Saquon Patterson. If you land all three of those, that's going to give Michigan a big bump in the rankings. On top of that, if you land Aaron Scott, obviously that's a blow to Ohio State. Then you're going to have to beat them again on the field and hope to maybe entice a Boo Carter or a Justin Scott or both, or a mixture of guys to flip. So, is it possible? Yes. Is it realistic? Maybe not this cycle. Moving forward to the next cycle, I think Michigan's already off to a really good start with 2025 recruiting. So the biggest thing I can say is just get an NIL plan in place specifically for recruiting. And I know Michigan has been pitching Empower, and that's great and all, but I still think you need some type of plan that favors recruiting that, Ohio State and some of these other schools do have. All right, guys, we have hit the 30-minute mark, which means it is rapid fire time, so I can head out to the movies. Let's go ahead and go down to Shadyville 3. He says, short of becoming big NIL players, what does Michigan need to do to land top 100 to 200 talent? I mean, expand NIL. I mean, NIL is the easy answer. Like I said, I mean, there are some other things you could do, like expand the recruiting department. I feel like Michigan's kind of lacking there. But overall, I think a lot of those type of of players, it's going to come down to having a better NIL plan in place. Uh, Vince Aluzu says, any chance Michigan lands Brandon Baker? Probably not. Nadeem Ahmed says, EJ, what's going on with Brian Robinson? How did Michigan lose momentum with him? They chose to lose momentum with him. They're higher on some of the other guys on the edge board. They prioritized Devin Baxter, Rudolph, Dominic Nichols, and Jacob Smith. They could circle back to him if they miss on Jacob Smith, but I think Michigan just kind of put some others ahead of him. Let's go down to Joshua Jackson. How high do you think Jaden Smith will rise in the rankings this next year? Hashtag Ask EJ. I think he'll be a 4-star. I think he's really raw, but man, the athletic skill set is there. And I wrote that after seeing him at the Under Armour camp in Charlotte. I was like, Michigan found something with this Jaden Smith kid before he was even committed to the Wolverines. So I've really liked him since the first time I saw him. I'm excited to get a chance to see him in pads, but I think he'll for sure be a 4-star level guy. PX Maxima says, I'm curious about your perspective. Do you prefer the old days of the February National Letter of Intent Day or present day thing where it seems like things get 365 days of coverage? I'm an old school recruiting guy. I've been doing this for a decade, so I miss some of the old recruiting stuff, man. Especially like with the rise of social media. I feel like it was better without social media being so heavily present. I miss the old days of video commitments and things of that nature. So um, yeah, I'm an old school recruiting guy, I guess, at this point. Let's go down to Brian 3000. Have you heard any more on Weenie allegations that Michigan lied to him, or is that just a cover for the bag? I'll just put it like this: Michigan also supposedly lied to Collins and Chiampong last cycle, and so I think it was just best that both parties move on. Let's go ahead and go down to Victor Rodriguez. Are there any names that we should keep an eye on? We haven't been talking about that Michigan has working on, has connections to. I think it's a dead period right now, so they're kind of just resetting the board, seeing what positions need to be addressed. Corner will need to be addressed. Nose will need to be addressed, and I think we'll just have to wait and see what names pop up. I think the staff's going to be hard at work evaluating film and then looking to see who rises as a senior. The Will of D says, speaking of 25, how do you feel we fit with David Sanders at the moment? I think schools like Clemson and Georgia are ahead of Michigan. They absolutely have to get him on campus at some point soon to even have a legit chance. Obviously, there's some connections there with Jaden and Channing, but and his offensive line coach is ex Wolverine Jonathan Goodwin, Channing's dad. But yeah, they haven't gotten him on campus. Chris Jonas said, "What happened to Taylor Tatum?" I think it was always going to be hard to get a second uh, back after landing Jordan Marshall, or a second highly touted back after landing Jordan Marshall. And Michigan took Ka'apana before Tatum was able to make a visit, and he definitely didn't want to be part of a three-back class. So I think Ka'apana's commitment kind of eliminated Taylor Tatum, and I think Mike Hart was completely fine having Ka'apana. So yeah, let's go ahead and go down to our last question from Lance Martin, and he says Michigan seems to be good in the transfer portal. Expect them to fill needs that way? Question mark. Yes, Michigan will also take full advantage of the transfer portal as well if they can't find some late risers, or they don't want to circle back to some of the other guys that were lower on the board. That's it, guys. I have to head out to the movie, so appreciate you all for joining me. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and subscribe to the Wolverine.com today.